there's all kinds of ways to grow food, and it looks like this monoculture thing that we're going through is just not going to work. At least it doesn't look very good. This year, and I guess I'm hearing that we're going to have the same problems next year. And if this goes on for another year, like 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to start growing food differently.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I have with me Dennis Delaurier. He runs Super Grand Solar Minimum.blogspot.com. An enormous amount of information in there. If you're looking for resources on the Grand Solar Minimum in terms of what it is, how it's going to affect our lives, how it's affected previous societies when we go back to, the modern minimum, the sport minimum, and we really look back in time about economy, population migration, plagues, and different types of things that affected the society as food became more scarce. People's immune systems became a little depleted. Food just got more expensive, less available. We're looking at some of the same scenarios playing out, but we have better shipping now, better interconnectivity, global logistics, which they didn't have at any of these previous Grand Solar Minimums. But Dennis's website is a wealth of information. And also on the practical standpoint, also an avid greenhouse grower, has so many tips, ideas, and just longevity of experience growing in greenhouses, which we're going to need to transition to as well. Now, our interview today, we wanted to start off talking about the global awareness, which we're both heavy on right now, because this is going to affect you most. When are people really going to wake up? I'm saying 2021. Dennis is saying 2021. And then also a few areas that you do not want to be in, just like we saw that eruption over on White Island in New Zealand. We do not want to be around anywhere volcanic. So we're going to run through a list of areas that you do not want to be around, but on the inverse, things that you could look for if you're seeking an area that could be more thriving and better for all around, growth conditions and stability as we move forward through these changes. As you know me, I've been traveling around looking for different areas to have fallback positions too. And there's quite a few around the planet. It's not like only one size fits all. Depends on what your risk assessment is and also how much you're willing to accept new cultures and norms. So Dennis, I appreciate you joining me. Thanks. We've been trying to get this interview together for a long time, and it's
been a while, hasn't it? We've been talking on and off for quite a while. It's kind of funny how I all that led up to actually knowing about you and your YouTube channel. And strangely enough, it started with Robert Felix years ago. I mean, a long time ago. I mean, like 10 years ago. And I purchased some of his books, and it just fascinated me. And I think that's really what got started. And then, of course, John Casey, his 2 books. Then my hero there is Rolf Witzig, I guess it is.
Rolf Witzig.
Witzig. Okay, I'm sorry, Rolf. Anyway,
I've talked to him a couple of times. We did an interview together, and it was really good. Who was on there? Yeah. Trevor from Suspicious Observers was with us, and we were talking about plasma sheaths and current inflows into the sun through the equatorial belt. It was quite the good interview. It's on the playlist, and sorry to go. Yeah, I think I keep going there.
Yeah, I watched that interview. Then, of course, there's Valentina Zakorova, magnetic fields of the sun, canceling each other out. That really, kind of grabbed me. And then, of course, I discovered you, and then later, let's see, who was it? Christian, Ice Age Farmer. And, there's other ones out there. There's other people out there that are kind of pushing this. What I find kind of strange is that some of the, what do you want to call it, professors and people that have doctorate degrees in this area, there's no one out there. They just, I don't know, I guess they're hiding. I'm not sure. They're worried about their job, and so you don't see a lot of that. So anyway, that's kind of how I got started. What is it? Henrik Spensmark, the Cloud Mystery, that got me going, and then finally, and this really kind of glued it all together, was the Thunderbolt project. Okay, once I found that, the whole universe just kind of clicked together. Okay, not only the universe, but our planet, our sun, me, our weather, our climate, and all these things kind of all intermingle. And I remember I walked around for about a week after I went through all these, and I did all the videos and everything, and it was just crazy how awake I became after I discovered how the universe actually works. The electrical plasma universe, and the sun being the plasma sun and the electric sun, and all that. So that's kind of what got me going.
Yeah, it is an eye opener once you understand that, what we've been taught about just pure gravity. And again, us being electrical beings, if everything else is affected electrically across the solar system, our galaxy and the whole universe in itself, with these electrical step downs on our sun, you see these changes in society about the same frequency as these grand solar minimums. And if you look around the planet right now and the amount of chaos going on, it seems that it's a signal, or there's a change, or there's a non-acceptance, or there's some kind of resonant frequency that's inside us on our hemispheres of our brain, affecting the way we think and cognitively process the information in the world around us. And I think that's going to get more intense as we go down, because you do find a lot of changes in governments during these grand solar minimums. Now, I don't know if it's just lack of food and people become angry, or if it's another bigger combination on top of that of electrical influences on our psyche and on our receiver antennas as human beings, and how our hemispheres literally electrically in the brain are firing. So there could be a lot of different combinations together like this. And, it's not outside the possibility to think in this way, that there's going to be vast changes in the way our societies operate in terms of banking, finance, government, individual interactions, community, law, and these types. Because you see right now, what are there, about 21 different cities or countries across the planet at this moment? 21. That's that's about a tenth of all the countries on this planet are experiencing some sort of social turmoil right now, with the citizens being angry at the way that the governments have handled the finance, and everything's becoming really expensive in a lot of countries. Us in the United States, we're living in our little magic bubble. But really, when you go outside the states, the rest of the planet, there's a lot of people that are just barely at the edge of scraping by. And then when transportation prices increase, fuel prices increase, food prices increase, and it's just, people are starting to really say, you're stealing all of our money, big politicians, and you're leaving us out here with nothing, and now you want to squeeze more blood from a stone. Enough's enough. So I personally feel that we're going to see more of these transitional changes governmentally, and which is the way people behave and act as we move through.
Yeah, that pretty well fits into what I think about every day too. I've had some people, go into my blog and say, "Oh, it's all gloom and doom," okay, and I'm my answer to that is that if you don't prepare, and if you don't, become involved in all of this, it is going to be gloom and doom. But I really think that right now humanity has I don't know, I don't know. I just think that people are going to be able to do amazing things if they just accept, what's going on, and look for solutions. One of the things that I push on my blog over and over and over and over is a community. If things really get nasty, and we're going to have problems with food, growing food, and all that, we're going to have to get along. Okay, it can't be just me. That's just not going to work. It's going to go crazy. But if we have communities, It's amazing. You can take 10, 15 people and grow tons and tons of food, and you can feed hundreds and hundreds of people. And one of my blog today, I showed a table of food, of vegetables and things that I grew. And my comment is that probably took 300 seeds to grow all that food. I guess that's what I'm trying to get over to people is that yeah, it's nasty. There's all kinds of things that might possibly happen. And so anyway, we're coming along here, and if we don't start getting along, if we don't start looking at new things to do, if new for instance, Bill, in your book there talk about greenhouses, the Chinese type of greenhouse. Well, if you take that greenhouse and you take some of the technology that we have nowadays and improve that sort of greenhouse, I think you could grow all over the place with that sort of greenhouse. So there's all kinds of ways to grow food, and it looks like this monoculture thing that we're going through is just not going to work. At least it doesn't look very good. This year, and I guess I'm hearing that we're going to have the same problems next year. And if this goes on for another year, like 2 or 3 years, we're going to have to start growing food differently. So I think that's really what my blog is about. It's about community. It's about awareness. It's about that sort of thing. And I don't know if that's getting across to anybody, okay? But that's kind of how I would like it to work out. And I think that's what's coming, and I think that's going to be, if we're going to make it, we're going to have to go that route.
Yeah, and the Walipini, I saw on your site there that you had shown even a fully functional, built into the hillside, sloped greenhouse coming out. Incredibly simple. They're just using aluminum piping and then some plastic, and you have a greenhouse as long as you have a hill. It's really that simple, and all these people saying, oh, it's so doom and gloom, all these things are going to happen. Well, they're only going to happen if you're unprepared. So you have to discuss the problem a little bit first before you can talk about the solutions, because with this whole brainwashing campaign and indoctrination over the last 40 years with the IPCC and this whole global warming narrative, and now they're trying to rebrand it as global meltdown because there's been so many changes, it's hard to keep up with the lexicon that they're using to change it all. But, people are just so complacent. Oh, it's only CO2. No, it's not. It's all this. Well, now that spooks them because they have to, really question what they put so rock solid faith in terms of government and NGOs and super high level global initiatives and government bodies out there too, like the UN. You really need to question that now. Is they truly giving you the information, or is it a ploy for a global tax on carbon emissions, which means literally everything you do they can tax. Literally every single step of your life they can tax. So, and that questions the rock solid foundations of how the world works around people. So they're afraid to even touch that. That in itself is scary enough. And I've had my own experience of that when I went to India. I landed in Calcutta on my first day by myself traveling to India. And this is back in the early 1990s. And everything I'd learned in the United States about all these, health organization and all these, society building, country building organizations and the World Bank and all these things. And the instant I landed there, I was like, oh, I've been taught a lie my whole life. Now, that was really difficult to deal with there for a few years, because then I started to look at everything around me. So if we come back to the same thing in the climate era where they've been told CO2, the top scientists said it, and then they have to realize, they've been faking the data. These people are saying what they're saying because they're going to lose their paychecks. The ones who spoke out early lost their tenure, lost their careers, lost their jobs, and only the ones who kowtowed for the last 40 years are the ones left. So there's been all these years and decades of attrition where those people who left with true information that wouldn't kowtow, that had the tenure, that couldn't be fired, were just replaced 20 years ago. And it's been a gradual onset process. So nearly everybody in academia now is on the payroll. And you can only get the funding if you go look for CO2 warming. Like I couldn't get funding, nor you, if we tried to prove the sun cycles in a grand solar minimum global cooling, earth cooling cycle. They wouldn't give us funding for that. And if we started talking like this out of line, we would definitely have some censorship. And you saw that one report, I forget the professor's name, excuse me for that, doing the reef studies down in Australia. And then, he was going contrary, saying, no, the reefs are doing really well, actually. They're on a cycle too. And then the university down there, I'll have to get everything and repost it in the interview here, but it was the most amazing thing. I just saw it these last couple of days. They wouldn't even accept the new information from the leading coral researcher on the planet because he was saying the reefs are doing fine and it's just a cycle. And, so to talk about the problem is scary for some people because it shatters their entire reality of what they thought was truth. And now they have to deal with a whole range of solutions. So, you're getting into a lot of different areas here to try to break through.
But the people that I deal with and I live with every day, they don't believe any of this. And although it's kind of funny. What I find rather strange is that, for instance, take my wife. And my wife actually does believe what I'm talking about. But she has no interest in knowing the what's underneath all that, what's causing it, And I think that's one of the big problems that people are seeing. In other words, if I talk about the cloud mystery and all these other people that I talked about, like John Casey, and that doesn't really mean anything to the normal person that's running around on the street and goes to the grocery store and, just doesn't see any problem. And so, it's like I tell these people, well, it's the sun, it's cooling. When things get cool, crops don't grow as well. And when that happens, you just don't have as much produce available, and the expense, goes up and things like that. And if it gets worse, then the prices are going to get higher and there's going to be less and less available to the world to eat. And how you get that over to somebody, I just don't know. So I don't know. It's when it comes to government, I think it's all an agenda. Okay, and the agenda is that we're going to keep people, eating horse manure and mushroom and grow mushrooms, and that's the reason, because these people know that this is happening. Governments do. Okay, look at China. Look at Russia. Okay, China and Russia are way into this, and you don't hear of that in the United States at all. You don't hear it in Europe. And so, what's going on there? Well, it's just that I don't know what it is. I guess what they're worried about is people are going to wake up one day, and when they wake up, it's like in my blog today, the one I just put out, that everybody is going to, all of a sudden, they're going to understand there's not going to be enough food, and they're going to go out, and just like at the gasoline stations, I forget what year that was, that they're going to go to the gas station, they're going to fill up their tanks, and there ain't going to be any gas. And it will be the same thing with food. Okay, people are going to go out, they're going to strip the grocery stores, and there's not going to be any food. And I think that's what they're really trying to prevent. I think they're just keeping people in the dark. And I'm not sure if that's something evil or that's just something they think is a good idea. So that's kind of where I am on that.
Because I do think it's about staving off the global panic as long as they can. Now, this rollover point that we wanted to talk about today, I'm in firm belief that it's 2021. So I'm even doing my own timeline out. So I'd like to compare here. So at the end of this year, now they're trying to suppress prices on the futures market by, I think the perception of stability now is worth more than the dollar value. So they're willing to take the loss on the dollar value because as we progress into this grand solar minimum, the reset of fiat currencies and everything. I mean, what is it? 96% of all money in the world's on a computer screen anyway. There's only 4% of real paper and coin in the whole world. So think about that. This is a really interesting number for those of you in finance and economics, modern money, monetary theory. Only 4% of all the money in the world is physical form. The rest of it's on a screen. So for them, if they lose a few digits, a 00 off of 96% of a screen somewhere, but I could keep you from panicking, I think that's a fair trade, because, you know, all they're doing is pressing buttons to make more money anyway. So if it loses and then they refund and people are getting 0% on, you know, taking out millions of dollars on overnight lending rates, etc., the whole system's rigged. And I found that out going on corn futures here. I mean, the corn price should have risen exponentially by now because there's so much loss, and it's the worst since 1938 on the harvests, and it's the lowest pretty much in since the 1930s in America, but the price has dropped. You know, so for me, there's something going on in the futures market, and they can say, oh, it's the pipeline. Prices will rise next year because we're still selling 2018 harvest. That doesn't jive with me, because if you know there's a shortage on the doorstep, there should be some, you know, supply-demand movement there, but there's not. So the perception of stability is going to be worth more. So the 2020, I really believe, is the year that a lot of people that read internet, that read blogs, that go and watch videos and do research and like a little more open-minded to new information, I'm going to say 10 to 15%. Let's make it 12%, make it even in the middle. 12% of the global population will be aware of this grand solar minimum and the effects on our planet and the effects from the sun and how this is going to change our society in harvest season of 2020. Now, as it gets worse next year, like you've already said, the ENSO and all these other factors are going to push more rain, and our harvest is already bad enough, and there's just going to be, it's going to be much more difficult to get food in the ground than it was this year, next year, because of all these things they're compounding factors. So by the harvest season of 2021 is when I believe we're in the rollover year of the 100th monkey, if you will, where everybody understands. I'm going to say global awareness at 80%. It's going to jump from that 12% to above 60. I'm going to say 80 at the most, because it's never going to be 100. There's always going to be people with a head in the sand or people who just don't care. There's da. So let's say it goes from 12 to 60% in a single year of awareness. That's a huge jump. And then everybody's out buying the same seeds, the same tools, the same foods, the same long-term food storage. This is where I think we're going to get into the difficulty. Beginning of harvest season 2021, I think the global awareness is over at that point where governments can no longer hide it. And then they're going to come out with this whole, oh, yeah, it's really going to get cold for a while, but, and then they're going to have to try to explain it how they fed everybody global warming for 40 years, but then we're getting into real cool. And you already see the play where they're trying to say CO2, excessive record numbers of CO2 is causing all the record cold. And this is what they're trying to sell you at the minute. But enough kindergartners are going to wake up and go, Dad, that doesn't make sense how hot can make cold. You know, and even the kindergartners are going to wake up and tell their parents that's just a stupid idea, that makes no sense how CO2 can cause record cold when they were told CO2 causes record warming. And now look at that, they're in the wishy-washy area where they're having trouble controlling the narrative at the moment. So, yeah, that's my timeline. 2020, 12% of the world, 60 to 80% by 2021 at the end. And 2022 is really when we get into the food shortages. It won't be enough out there for everybody because there'll be too many hands in the cookie jar. And you saw what's happening in Venezuela. One last point. They were stopping trucks on the road, and, you know, saw they were there. Now there's guards on all the trucks. So, you know, they would stop a truck full of 5,000 chickens, and it was like, oh, I never saw anything. They would run up and rip the cage of chickens, let them spill open on the road, run around grabbing chickens by the neck. It was the most... That set me right there, that if this is the way it's going to go, when people are stopping trucks on the road, that our delivery systems aren't going to work properly, and we'll need guards, and then they got guns. And then what happens if you got a horde of 75 people coming toward a semi-tractor trailer that's stuck in traffic to loot it in America? Then what happens? You know, this is where I think we're going, 2022.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to start probably in the Middle East first. You know, it's going to progress from there. You know, you saw the problems that they had, what was it, in Egypt, and bread.
Potatoes, yeah,
Uh,
the potatoes, armies in the
things that,
potato
yeah,
warehouses too. That's
potato.
incredible.
So it's been kind of crazy. I have access to a wholesale foods. Okay, and I'm tracking what's happening there at the wholesale level,
Mm.
and I'm seeing some kind of strange things. What I'm trying to see is that, for instance, pastas, tomato powder, um, uh, just on and on, pastas and spaghettis and things like that. They're letting that inventory kind of drop off, okay, and the prices stayed pretty stable. But I've got a feeling that once they get rid of all that, 20-pound box of pasta, say, okay, for $14. Anyway, that once that's gone, what's going to come back into that store is going to be, a lot more expensive. And I can see that now. They're not replenishing. They're just getting rid of what they have. And, eventually then they're going to have to use, the crops that we just harvested to make all these things. And so that's one of the things I've had in my blog is how to track what's going on. Okay, with the Grand Solar Minimum, it's really easy. All you need to do is go to websites, go to TV stations, go to and look at local news. That's where you're going to really find out what's happening. It's going to be the local news. It's going to be what's happening to the farmers locally. So anyway, that's kind of where I'm looking at, and what I'm trying to look at is one of the things I think that really bothered me more than anything is how fast this is starting to I don't know what to call it. It's like I didn't expect the things that are happening now to happen this quickly. Okay, the crop problems, the the weather here in Texas. We feed all the weather here. Okay, the heat, the humidity, the moisture, and all that ends up up north, and it collides with temperatures that are Arctic temperatures, like I think we're going to see this week. And I never expected this sort of thing this quickly, and so I was always thinking, well, maybe this is like a 400-year cycle or a 200-year cycle, but it looks like it's worse than that. And we're starting to see seasons get shorter, and we're seeing more rain and moisture, and that's really really typical of a Grand Solar Minimum is the moisture and the rain, and heat in some parts of the world, and really cold in other places. So I think that's what confuses people. They see all these different things happening, and they can't put it all together and say, okay, well, this is what a Grand Solar Minimum looks like. Kind of where I'm going. I'm looking at what part of the Earth would you live? What are some good places? And you've been talking about that. The old Roman grow areas, things like that. I think one of the things I thought was kind of interesting is you were talking about the EU wanting an army. Okay, and I absolutely agree with you on that one, boy. They need that army to get to find some to have food, and so there's just all kinds of crazy political things. If you watch what's going on politically, if you watch what's going on climate-wise, you're going to be a year ahead of everybody else if you just